Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. I'm George Binns, and this evening we're going to continue the discussions about the state of the city. And to help us understand it better, Hannah Bowen, City Councilor at Large, has joined us. Welcome, Hannah. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, George.
Yeah. So as we have this little discussion, the teacher strike is still going on, which is the big news that sort of drowns out everything else.
Yeah, taking up a lot of the oxygen right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I could pontificate at great length about how it should be going, what's going on and wrong, what's going wrong and so forth. But from the little data, real data that's out there, I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like should have been solved months ago, shouldn't even gone into start the season without a contract. But hopefully when it's all over, we can get back together and understand a little better about what can we do better next time? What went wrong this time?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think anyone loves where we are right now. It does not feel great out there. And, I think it's a hard one. I think the sort of opening positions of both the needs of our teachers and the conditions in our schools, what students are facing, how things changed during the pandemic, how we're still trying to catch up and keep up, what's going on in our economy as a whole, and how we're underinvesting in social services and care work and everything. Like, that's all there. That gets people, feeling really kind of at wit's end about how do we make this work. And on the side of how do we make municipal finances work. Across Massachusetts, a lot of cities and towns are at that point of the cost of providing the services we all need has not stayed within the Prop 2.5 limits that we have to navigate within unless we pursue things like overrides or new growth or all the ways that we can raise more revenue, and we're all up against it. And so I think coming in, it was going to be a hard negotiation no matter what, but the way it's proceeded hasn't felt great to anyone. I don't think anyone feels particularly well respected or on either side, and that's going to take time to recover from.
That gets to be the downside of one of these contentious things.
Yeah.
What kind of a residual feeling is left with the teachers, with the administrators, with the city? Yeah. So it doesn't go away just like that. It drags on for a while. Yeah. And again, not knowing about what's going on really.
It's hard to know, when negotiations are for good reasons behind closed doors. It's also, it makes it difficult for everybody to understand fully. And we are getting more information already. We will get more information as the negotiations in some way wrap up, and they will, and we'll find that pathway forward. But it's hard, and I think it's hard, as a city council, we're not directly involved in the negotiations, and we're hearing from people every day what the impact is of the strike, of just our city budget overall, where we're at. So we're thinking about it. We'll have a part to play in the next budget cycle. So it's on everybody's minds, and I think really also just thinking about how we can, we know it's a hard conversation. We know there are a wide variety of views on it, and how do we have that conversation more productively? And
the point you're making about the city council's involvement is you guys passed the budget.
We did.
Which had some money in it to accommodate a settlement.
Yes.
Most likely.
And it had, reserves for negotiations in the school budget and reserves for negotiations with other city unions that are also happening at the same time.
And since that's all public knowledge, it's really on the table when you hit the negotiations. Yeah. So I'm imagining that there's going to be some push for more and beyond what's nominally available. And so what happens then? Does the mayor come back and say we need a supplemental budget?
Yeah, so if the negotiations end in a contract that can't be funded at its, with its provisions in what's already been appropriated, then the mayor would have to come with a request for a transfer from some other funding source that's sort of in the budget but had been allocated to something else, or a request for another appropriation in some way to fund it. So a good example is the city just concluded negotiations with library staff, their union.
Yeah.
And the new contract, including any like anything that falls within this fiscal year, is something like $30,000 above what was budgeted for that department. And so there is a request in front of the council now to fund that with a transfer from the reserve for negotiations.
Yeah.
The money's there, so that one's sort of a straightfurt process.
That was planned for.
Yeah, and so if it goes beyond that, then it becomes a question of how do we as a city fund that?
Yeah.
And if it's not funded, the city still has to operate within the budget that was passed.
Yeah.
So then, there are a number of choices at that point. How do you reallocate within the school budget if we're talking school contract or elsewhere to meet both the contract obligations and the budget?
Yeah.
So that would be the point at which the city council would see something, as if a request came to us for a transfer or an appropriation.
So ultimately, you are the ones that say yes or no.
Yeah, and that have to weigh at that stage, how does this contract, how does this department fit with overall city services and city budget, city obligations, and taxpayers' capacity to fund that and willingness to fund that. And again, that's where we're all in a tough spot. I hear from people who are worried about their taxes continuing to increase, and I hear from people who would gladly pay a little more in taxes to get the services they're looking for. And that's what we as a city have to decide where we land on that. And that's where the council comes in.
And everybody's got their own idea of what services they need.
Yes. Yeah. We all need slightly different things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And, you start talking about extra taxes right now. There's a Prop 2.5 limit.
Yep.
And in reality, I just ran the numbers on my own tax bill for the last 6-8 years, and I've been paying an average of 4.2% increase year after year after year.
Yeah.
And what's not really advertised in the taxes, oh, by the way, it's on your assessment, and your assessment is going up. Yeah. And this is one of my pet peeves with this whole business about unrealized gains.
Yeah.
Because, my house is theoretically worth
technically,
more.
But do you want to sell it? Do you want to move? No, it's your home.
And the other half of the game is what makes it unreal is, this example I've used before, I like it. If I had bought a bar of gold at the same time I bought that, it would be much more valuable than the house.
Yeah.
But okay, that's just difference in properties.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, if push comes to shove, I can take a slice off the bar of gold and sell it for $2,500 an ounce about now. I can take a shovel full of dirt out of my backyard. And
nobody wants to pay you for that. I know.
It's not fungible.
No,
so
not as much. No.
It's funny money. It makes things a little difficult and challenging. But yeah. And speaking of money, the city's got a bunch of really big projects.
Yes.
The library project that ballooned out of control.
Yep.
And you guys took a hit on that one because there was an article in the paper that because they couldn't get the money, the $18 million, to fix the air conditioning, they couldn't use it as a cooling source.
For a couple of days.
Yeah. And the day they shut it down was Juneteenth, and the library wouldn't have been open anyway.
Yeah, and to be fair, when we had to vote on that proposal, I voted against it in the end and want to see us renovate the library and fix some of the energy efficiency, comfort, usability, accessibility issues with it, and felt like we didn't get the proposal in the form that we could really get behind as a whole council at that time, but asked, if we don't pass this, what will some of the consequences potentially be?
Yeah.
And that was one of them, that there might be a few days that until we actually update the HVAC, we can't keep pace with those really hot days. There may be days in the winter it's hard to keep the building warm enough. Like that's a reality. And that was a tough choice because, ideally we'd be able to just get those fixes in quickly. And to me, the library is an incredibly valuable resource we should be investing in. And for a couple of days, if we can use it as a cooling center most of the time we need it, the services that the library is designed for are accessible most of the time. And we have some additional, the police station and other buildings available in those really critical moments, then I was okay with, coming back to the table with a new plan. We haven't gotten that new plan yet, but for sure we need to invest in renovations there.
Well, the other part
and in other buildings too.
Yeah. So. The other part of the problem with that whole situation is you, the city council, had approved $300,000 or something like that, or $3 million.
Yeah.
$3 million 2 years before to fix the AC.
Well, to build towards this project. So one of the strategies that I think has been really, really smart and well used in the city is this combination of borrowing for large projects that spreads the cost of them out over all the people who use that infrastructure now and in the future, and sort of prepaying, so using any cash reserves that we have, any revenues we weren't anticipating, or costs that come in under, sort of reallocating funds on an ongoing basis that we don't know, we haven't budgeted as recurring, but putting those away for large projects. So that's how the cost of the police station was managed, some of our school buildings. It's been a smart financial strategy.
Bowen does, I think, a very good job.
Well, it's tough, though, because, when we lock that money up in a capital project fund for something, like that money is still there.
Yeah.
Can't be used on anything else until it's used for library renovation.
Or until you change your mind.
Yeah.
Vote a different.
And transfer it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so that's been one of the most active discussions, I think, among the council and the mayor's team, our finance team, about, how is our capital planning keeping up with the major projects we need to do? And are we tucking money away too early that could be put to more productive use on other projects? And then we get to the bigger ones. But without seeing sort of the full plan, it's hard to know. But yeah, we have some money already appropriated, set aside for the library project. We've put some money aside for other pieces. The funding's all lined up for the McPherson Youth Center. The demolition has started. There's a big pit in the parking lot. That work is underway. City Hall will be up next. We saw an initial request for a loan order. That's been withdrawn, but expecting that to come back sooner than later.
That's a major sticker shock.
It's a big one.
It went from 25 million to 34.8 million.
Now back down,
Now it's back to something else. And again, this is one of the questions comes up with the union negotiations this year. If they end up running over what was anticipated, then it's going to start to impact some of these other major projects that, we just really can't do that much of an overhaul.
And it's so easy, unfortunately, and I think we all know this in our personal budgets too. It can be really easy to let some of the maintenance things go if they're one-time expenses, and you're like, I can put that off a little longer. But then it comes back and is more expensive in the end. And so we don't want to fall into that trap of committing so much of our operating budget that we never have funds available to keep up with maintenance, to get ahead of those capital improvements. Like it does have to be a balance, and there's different types of funding mechanisms for each, but it's not an obvious or easy choice.
It's when the roof starts to leak, you got to fix it.
Yep.
And unfortunately, they didn't.
And maybe even have a plan for when the roof's useful life is reached to be ready to fix it. Like have that savings
account.
Kind of.
And if the useful life is projected to be 25 years, and all of a sudden it starts leaking at 20.
Right. You got to do something.
You can't wait 5 more years to fix it, kind of thing.
You at least need a bucket.
Yeah. And that was one of the challenges that led to the demise of the previous high school, that the roof started leaking, got to one of the beams, and the beam dropped, which was kind of exciting.
Not ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think we all understand that, you can have a plan, but reality sometimes it forces you to adjust the plan.
Yeah. And I think the last several years have taught all of us that those change is constant and we can't anticipate everything. And part of how we react is like, okay, something new, we have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
It's not what we were planning on, it's not what we were prepared for, but it's here, so how do we deal with it?
So that's the whole idea behind the rainy day fund.
Yeah. Yep.
That essentially you're putting money away just in case.
Yeah.
And at the time, you really don't have an idea of what you're going to do with it.
Right.
But you know there's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what else is new and different in the City Hall?
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm excited. I know we've talked about housing policy before, and I've been excited to see a whole bunch of people filing to build ADUs, accessory dwelling units, that need slight variances or approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals because their existing property might be non-conforming, like a lot of the city is.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we were right down to the wire trying to figure out how to write our ordinance to accommodate that. So I've been thrilled to see people getting those requests in, seeing the process work. There's that opportunity if something is really going to impact the neighbors for it to be denied.
Yeah.
If it's not, for it to be approved, and get those alternative types of housing that are sort of still kind of low density, but allowing more variety in housing stock to get built. So I think that demand was there. And then the policy passed at a state level. So we're kind of ahead of the curve, and whether the language of that is challenged, whether other communities are as quick to implement that now state level policy, we're there, and I think got that validation that it's part of what's needed. So I've been excited to see that, and I think that's the sort of stuff that it's a little bit behind the scenes, but it's like doing all those little things, delivering on all those little things are what will add up to, 5 years from now, not feeling as much of the housing crunch, ideally.
Yeah. And that gets you back to the living wage that the school committee is talking about.
Yeah.
And one of my goals is to get the city to accept that we need to have a complete city.
Yeah.
Which means everybody that works here can afford to live here.
Yeah.
And that gets to be a challenge. The ADUs are a way around it.
Yep.
The other half of the advantage of an ADU that people don't recognize is that when seniors need to downsize, I've known a couple of guys that they've had a nice house in Beverly, all the kids moved out, and they're looking for something else.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist here.
Right.
And one gentleman I know, he had to move out to Newburyport to find something that's satisfied. So even with all the building down on Rantoul Street, I think there needs to be a rethinking of what kind of buildings are we putting down there?
Yeah.
Or with Folly Hill coming up, that's another one.
Yeah, another active debate right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a problem with access.
Yeah.
And right now, it's relatively straightforward to get from 128 into Folly Hill. But if you're getting out of Folly Hill and you want to go west, it's a tortuous path to go east,
you got
roundabout.
around.
And
it's
at
not
the same
ideal.
time, access to the city itself. So you don't want Folly Hill to be a isolated community, just built on the edge of the highway. You'd like to have it as part of the city, and that gets into the, not in my backyard, you're going to run these roads.
I know. And that is a hard one because I can imagine many ways of solving that problem, but you're right that they would be changes for people that may or may not want to see those changes and may or may not benefit from immediately from seeing additional housing there. And so I'm glad seems like a pretty robust process with thinking about the environmental review, because there would be some use of what's currently not built on land.
Yeah.
And so thinking about the environmental impact, not just of the building, but of any traffic impacts, accessibility, sort of transit connections, all that. But also, thinking about impacts on city infrastructure, all of that. Like that's all being, from what I've seen, really carefully interrogated and worked on and problem solved. So I'm hopeful. I think it's an area that is ripe for more development, and all those things need to be solved for. So I'm watching the process and trying to
one of the questions
to make sure that it is that robust process.
One of the questions I have about that whole area is cell signaling is a prominent occupier. They wanted to expand. They went to Manchester. Never heard, well, why didn't you expand here in Beverly?
Yeah.
And again, way back when they did the Plan Beverly, 90% of the people that work in Beverly work in the health industry. So this seemed to be, to me anyway, a logical path of, hey, expand cell signal, it's more jobs for Beverly residents.
Yeah, and regional. And so I think one of the things I'm excited about as well is the Economic and Community Development Commission has really just been revived in the last year or so. A bunch of new appointments, new staff in the planning department supporting that work. And they're starting, and there's just a grant that came in to help support kind of this broader planning effort on like what kind of economic activity do we want to support and incentivize and encourage and attract. And there's definitely some great work in Beverly between the Main Streets and Chamber of Commerce and small business community on our sort of like walkable downtown local small business. A lot of great thinking and work there. And I think newer conversations and conversations we need to have about what are some of the bigger, large companies, what industries, what kind of space and support is needed, and what kind of like vision from the city is needed for companies that are looking to expand or are just getting going or are looking for a place to relocate, see Beverly as like wanting them and making it easy and feasible and workable for them to be here.
Cherry Hill is just about full, and the only other active area is Dunham Road.
And very active conversations about how to make that more accessible.
Yeah, it's another accessibility problem. And excuse me, that discussion has been going around since the Scanlon administration. And again, depending upon getting state money to put and state approval to put some sort of bridge across 128 and access to beyond the housing area. Because aside from the fact it's a nightmare curve to get around there, it's a narrow road, and every time they have a big event at the
music
theater, it's a traffic jam. So there is obviously a need to get better communication to that area, and it's hung up. It's just not going anywhere. And there seems to be a bunch of issues that come down to how do we coordinate better with the state? And the two bridges are another example.
And our meeting to talk about it was postponed recently. So it is. I think that level of coordination, there are a lot of projects around the state that need investment, and we need to have that clear and open communication about why these are priorities for us, how they benefit our whole region, what Beverly is doing to make those projects successful, where the state role is, like keeping on top of the state agencies that are working in that area, and for all of us in the city to think about like what are our contact points in state government that that we're using to advance those projects.
Yeah, and that gets to be a big problem because like the bridges, that's a communication with us in the state. There is development of Folly Hill that is going to need some sort of adjustment to the access to 128. Dunham Road, just down the road from there, is another one of. And
it's like every single one of our exits points to something that needs collaboration with the state.
You talk about Beverly as being a very attractive area because we're right on 128. We're trying to get to 128.
Right.
And I was coming back from Danvers the other day at about 8:30 in the morning on Route 62.
Oh, yeah.
And the traffic was backed up from the Rotary, or that bridge intersection, whatever you call that thing, almost all the way back to the yacht club.
Yeah.
And that has been another ongoing.
Yeah, and it's a lot of people in cars at exactly the same time on roads that can't quite accommodate them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so there are some real problems that Beverly is being hamstrung by. Lack of integration with the state, or getting the state to come up with a solution that works.
Yeah.
They redid the intersection at 62 and it's still a morass going through there. So there's a lot of work to do.
There is.
Yeah. And believe it or not, we've had a half hour of our fun.
My goodness, the time flies.
Yeah. And so as it turns out, there's lots more to talk about, and
there always is.
I'd like to have you come back and continue this discussion because there's going to be a lot more interesting issues to come up.
Yeah, no, I'd like that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching this evening. And as I mention after every show, that if you have a comment, my email address is at the front of the show and after the credits. Send me a comment. And if you have a longer discussion, we can make room for you here at the table. And thanks again for watching, and there'll be more.